Hey guys, today we have a pretty cool survey, not survey, but some statistics about the state of remote work and really how remote work is growing and some stats and what people who work remotely are saying about working remotely. I know as software developers, a lot of us aspire to working remotely. It's something that I do full time, and I'll probably do a video talking about what it's like working full remote. But I saw this and I absolutely loved it. Just the topic of it. I haven't actually even gone through it, except I read like a blog about it, and that's what. But here's the actual data, the PDF. We're gonna dive into all of it. Let's check it out. Might I take a moment to recommend our long-term sponsor? Long-term, as in we've been working together for almost 3 years now, which is pretty crazy. And a lot of changes have happened at Dev Mountain. They've changed a couple locations in the past to now they're in the Lehigh area. They're also in Dallas and Phoenix. But if you're interested in considering a coding boot camp, might I recommend devmountain.com. They have programs in full stack JavaScript, iOS development, QA, UI, UX. You can find out more information at devmountain.com. All right, so state of remote work. So we're going to be talking about what it means to work remote and what other people, what it means to them. But for those of you who don't know what I'm like sort of talking about, I think I saw in here 1 in 20 U.S. workers are now working remote. And that's a pretty big deal. That means 5% of the population works some part remote, when a lot of roles nowadays don't even allow you to do it. But millions of people, 5% of this, millions of people are working remote, and that they took 1,200 full-time workers in the United States and asked them why they choose to work remote, what opportunities, what their satisfaction, how satisfied they were, and the challenges that they face with being remote. Now, as someone who works remote, I can tell you that without having even dove into this, that the things that are important to me is my stress levels down. I'm saving money. I don't have to drive to work. I'm saving time. I know that I'm not willing to. So like, I'm all about job hopping. Like, I think it's a good thing to do in your career, and eventually that you reach sort of caveat. But I'm much happier working fully remote than I have ever been at a job before. And because of that, I don't think I'll be leaving anytime soon. Like, I'll be at this company for a while. So key findings. So this is the Cliff Notes version, the stuff that really 2/3 of workers say they want to work remote. Nearly half do so at least weekly. So nearly 2/3 of U.S. workers polled said they work remotely at least some of the time. Nearly half say they do at least weekly. So 1 in 2 people work remote at least 1 day a week, which is kind of cool. I know a lot of developers. For developers specifically, I would say the average developer works 1 day a week. Maybe not as a junior, but getting up there. I'm not sure what they mean by individual contributors. Maybe when they say this, they mean that like people who work for themselves. If you're gonna work for yourself, why the hell wouldn't you work remote? I don't know. And also, I'm surprised by this. Managers work remotely almost as much as non-management. Now, I will say that if your people are working remotely, then there's no reason for you as a manager to, so I guess that shouldn't surprise me. Senior leadership represents the highest percentage of full-time remote workers. So what that means is that those CEOs, those CTOs, the people who are at the top of the company are working more remote than anybody else, which means that they understand the value of it. But it also makes me wonder about those people that don't like their employees working remote. What are you doing that you don't like it so much? The industries with the highest percentage of people who are working remote: healthcare, which I'm kind of surprised by because I thought healthcare, you sort of had to be there, like in person, right? Like to see the person. Well, I guess a lot of these doctor organizations and like that will check you out online or through your camera. So internet technology and financial services. Let's see here. Facilities, operations, and IT have the highest, so obviously us. Customer service, support, success, and sales. All right. The share of remote workers by income disproportionately favors the higher income category. So the more money you make, the more likely it is you are to work remote. Workers who work remotely at least some of the time are happier, feel more trusted, less stressed, are more inclined to recommend their employer to a friend, and are less likely to leave their office-bound colleagues. Pretty much what I just said. Oh, there's more. Excellent. More than a third of workers would take a pay cut up to 5% in exchange for the option to work remotely at least some of the time. I would say that's probably true. 10% is high. 20% would take even greater than 10% cut. Whew. More than 40% of remote workers plan to work remotely more in the future. All right. I think we can all understand that. And 50% of the poor people who don't work remote want to work remote. Only 1 in 5 people said they didn't want to work remotely at any frequency. Those people who like to knock on your desk, talk to you, and never leave you alone so you can't get anything done, that's who I think that 19% is. Remote workers are about 30% happier than their on-site job workers. The impact, now this is something that I'm concerned about, so let's read this. The impact on worries about career progression for remote are greatly exaggerated. More than 2/3 of remote workers are not concerned that working remotely will limit their movement up in the corporate ladder. I am concerned about this, so I fall into that 1/3 category. But I do think it's something that, it's one thing if you work remote, it's another thing if your entire team works remote. If your entire team works remote, I think there's less to worry about. People choose to work remotely to achieve better work-life balance. Definitely true. I know for me, like I had to go to the dermatologist today, just did it, no problem. I had to take Boise last week to get neutered or spayed rather. No problem. Increased productivity. I'm struggling with my words today. Productivity, focus, and avoid a commute. The commute. I did a video on how working 3 days remote from a commute standpoint saved me about $12,000 a year. 60% of those polled find themselves being interrupted, talked over during hybrid meetings, whether in the office or remote. All right, so let's see some data visualizations. So who took the survey? As we mentioned, 1,200 people between the ages of 22 and 65. So a broad... I would say that's the majority of the working world is probably in that age group. Of those 1,200, 62% work remotely at some frequency. 38% work on site. So about 2/3. How often people work remotely? 54% say at least once per month. 48% say at least once per week. 30% work remotely full time. 48% once per week. I don't count this one. 1 day a month. That's not working remotely. That's just you. You couldn't go to work today, so you answered some emails from home. But 30% work remotely full time. I'm in that 30%. Let me tell you, life is good. I like it. Last year, 68% worked at least once a month, indicating that the U.S. This is globally, that the U.S. is slightly behind the global average in remote work. But, apparently U.S. workers who are working remote work full-time remote much more often. Let's see here. Full-time 30%. You can see the breakdown here. So, like, that's pretty nice. Remote work frequency by level. What are they saying? Individual. Oh, are individual contributors or employees? Is that what they're saying? So... employees are more likely to work. I'm surprised by that than consultants. Every consultant I've ever worked with has worked remote, but I guess that's just been my, that's the whole thing about anecdotal evidence. Maybe the stats don't support it. And executives, vice president level or C level, are working remote in higher percentages, so they're taking advantage of that. Why shouldn't the everyday dev take advantage of that? You can see more breakdown there. Industries to get into. So I've always wanted to get in financial services. There's a lot of PTO. There's a lot of benefits that you don't get into. I'm in a financial services. industry, so I fall into some of the highest. Between that and being in IT, I fall into the highest level of remote aspects. So there's remote being a good benefit amongst other things. And so you can see more breakdown here of on-site workers versus remote workers. Let's see. Obviously, which IT departments. And it's kind of interesting to see that some of the highest on-site or match up with the highest remote, but things that administrative has a pretty high chance here. But salary information. Okay, I always like to talk about money. So we learned that remote workers who earn salary of $100,000 or more per year are 2.2 times more likely per year to more frequently than on-site workers. Okay, I think what this sentence is saying is that you're 2.2 times more frequently work remote than their on-site workers. 26% remote workers make $100,000 a year versus 8% of on-site workers who earn that amount. And this is something I've sort of been talking about in if you ever catch me in one of these like money videos, is that what you'll start finding as you progress in your career is that you will hit a sort of glass ceiling where like in the Tampa market, I could probably get maybe $10,000 to $15,000 more than what I'm doing right now in terms of base salary, but that's on the extreme end, and there's only a handful of companies that could pay me that. But what you'll find out is that where you're really going to make the next big jump in your career is in things like bonuses, with profit sharing, with PTO, with better benefits, such as remote. And so to keep these top tier companies that want to retain their developers and get developers, just get them. They can't forget retaining them. Let's just get them first. There sort of is a salary cap, but the next tier for you in your career is these benefits like remote as you move up, which is why once you get past that $100,000 level, you're starting to see. I've had this cough since I've been sick. Excuse me. You'll start seeing that more and more benefits are going to fall up in that way. You can see additional salary breakdown here of what remote workers make, how that breaks down. So I fall into this category, which is, so you can see here that comparatively speaking, $100,000 or more, 27% versus of remote workers versus on-site workers, which are 6%, which is astounding difference that I wasn't expecting. 36% of on-site workers have been at their current organization for 10 years or more, and that's 7% more for remote workers who've been at their company for 5 years or fewer. So although remote work is, although remote work is gaining tempo, and I think these numbers we'll see next year in 2020 that these numbers are slightly shifting where people are staying longer at remote work because that's what people are saying. Currently, based on the previous data, which is going to take when you're doing things in 10 years increments, going to take a while to adjust. Currently, it looks like on-site people are staying at organizations longer. So, all right. How impact loyalty? 1 second. This is getting a little yellow. Let me go ahead and turn this off. All right. There we go. I'm awake. But yeah, so working remotely makes them happier. All right. More likely to recommend a friend to a company. I can tell you that ever since I started working remotely, I've had a lot more people interested in working at my company, and I've recommended several people because the remote aspect, even if you're not on my team, the company culture is very remote focused, where you can get a day or two remote. That item alone makes me more likely to recommend people, and people are more likely to want to jump ship. agree that they feel more trusted at work. There is really something about like, hey, I don't need you right over my shoulder, you know, and that's a nice feeling. Less stress. I definitely agree with this. I know people who won't go in office the next day because they just can't handle the house is on fire all the time. And when you're in the office, it's very like, and I feel like because you are so much more likely to communicate over chat. Like, yeah, you have video calls and you're more likely to communicate over chat or email, that people are more careful with what they have to say. But in the moment when you're very stressed in person, things get a little heated sometimes. And so remote sort of has that barrier separation and lowers that stress level. And of course, it makes you manage your work life a little bit better. Less likely to leave their employer. From a benefit standpoint, if I say, hey, if I go to work 5 days a week and it's 45 minutes each way, and now I have an hour and a half round trip drive, and they say, cool, was that per week? Oh, 7.5 hours of additional work. Well, how are you going to make that up to me if by me going into the office? There's a very practical aspect, and about a third would take a 5% pay cut. And I can tell you, I probably would take a 5% pay cut to work remote. All right, working remotely in the future. People want to do it more frequently, the same amount. Plan to work remotely less than they currently do. So there is about 1 in 5 people who don't like it, which is understandable. You know, it's not for everybody. I know some people have trouble reaching out and like connecting. So like one thing I always do is always have my webcam on. I want people to see me. I want people to hear me. I want people to know, you know, what I'm doing and whatnot. I'm definitely happier at the current company I'm at. I would say remote plays a big part of that, as well as other things. And I think 29% more when 70% people hate their job. It's a pretty big deal. It's just a 16% difference here than on-site workers. Although I think probably the majority of your happiness comes for who you work for and your direct superiors. 13% more stay at their job for the next 5 years. 5 years is a long time, but I think so. 55. This is a stat that employers should be very, very worried about. 55% of remote workers would be likely to look for another job if they are no longer allowed to work remotely. So let's say you have 20% of your workforce working remotely full time, and you have somebody who comes in and says, nope. And I think a company did this. I'm forgetting the name of this, where some CEO came in and was like, I don't like this remote stuff. We're no longer doing it. And they had a huge backlash. I had to fall back a week later because the majority, that's what you're saying when 55%, the majority of people who work remotely, if you said they no longer could, are considering other options, which is something to really understand how much people value it. And 61% of people would expect a pay increase if they were no longer expected to work remotely, which, by the way, probably is not going to happen, which is why this is probably going to happen. 70% of people say they don't care. I sort of disagree with that. I do think that sometimes you need to be seen and heard, but I do think it depends on how your team's organized and what you're trying to do. My boss, for instance, my boss's bosses, he's in a different state. So it doesn't like he's doing. I mean, he's got a couple people below him. He's running a couple different teams, and we're not even the same state, and we make it work just fine. So, you can see a lot of reasons that people like to work remote, right? Work-life balance. I wonder what the shift on work-life balance is. I do think this is a personal choice as well. Like I want to say that because one book I would recommend to developers who are struggling with work-life balance, how to interact with the business and your stress, is the book The Clean Coder. This is linked in the description below. Help a brother out, but it's one of the best books that you can read about how to be a professional. I recommended it for Ricky, my buddy Ricky Garcia, has a YouTube channel also, and he was struggling at his previous workplace, and it helped really lower his stress and how to handle it. And maybe I should reach out to him and have him do a video about that, because I think it's such a great book. It really helped me, and it helps you interview better in process. So benefits and perks which are most important. So let's talk real quick about what expectations are. So there are some benefits that are optional, that are perks, and there are some benefits that are required that any decent employee who's not in the beginning of their career and is a quality candidate won't even entertain the idea. The idea that health insurance is not a requirement, like, no. A company has to have health insurance and it has to have good compensation, right? Those are the two things out the door. And then it has to have good PTO. So you can see the top three here are 100% things. So next thing, retirement savings match. Some sort of 401k or something like that. Followed up by, now we're getting into, like, these four I would say are these four right here, in my opinion, are the base level requirements to keep good employees. Because otherwise what's going to happen is that any LeBron James of their field, right, the Michael Jordans of their field, they're just going to go to another team where they do get these four things. Because I don't think it's unreasonable that you put 5 days a week to a company and you don't have health insurance, good compensation, vacation, and retirement. I think those are all reasonable things that every company should have. So next things, we're talking about like actual perks. These are going to be where you're going to have the A-class companies that have these things, A and B companies. And then we're talking about S-tier. Performance-based compensation, that profit sharing, that, bonuses, things like that. Flexibility in the workplace location. This is important too, to where, hey, I don't want to go in the office, that remote. Wellness programming. I didn't think this would be so high, but maybe it's because I'm a lazy piece of shit. I don't know. Education / training reimbursement. I really like this. But before so a little story is, I got really pissed off at current company that on a Saturday I wanted to go to DevFest Florida, which I did, but I asked my work if they would pay for me. It was $100. They told me to get fucked. And I filled out job apps that day, and it's just one of many things. It's sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I filled out job apps. By the way, I'm applying to be a speaker there. Hopefully I'll have some good news in the near future. Parental leave. This is definitely important. Something that I've started looking into, because April and I are going to have kids in a few years, but it sort of depends on where you're at, right? Okay. Remote workers care more about compensation than they care about stock options. Yeah. At least in my opinion, stock options can be useless. So like a lot of you guys who are considering working at startups, and maybe you have to get some experience, but startups are the most stressful organizations you can work for, and because they're not profitable. So there's literally a burn chart to when they run out of money, and then everyone's out of a job, and they're sort of figuring it out. They have to figure out. They haven't figured it out yet. Like established companies figured out they actually are profitable. But yeah, I don't care about stock options. But that's just my 2 cents on that. I've interviewed with a lot of startups, and there hasn't been a company I've interviewed with where I'm like, yo, that's gonna take off. Like if I interviewed for Airbnb back in the day, I could tell you just off the dude, I'll take all stock options. Like there's some companies that you're like, you just see that and you're like, why isn't this a thing? And give me all the stock options. That's all I want. We're going into more difference on on-site and off and remote workers, which is a good thing. No, is that different people have different preferences to what's important to them. Why? I don't know. Maybe remote workers are just more savages about certain things that they like. Remote workers say they work more than 40 hours per week. 43% more than on-site workers do. So I work 40 hours a week, but I study outside of it. And I don't know why this is. This was probably one of the things that I saw in the article that I was very surprised that remote workers work more. And I guess they just feel like, oh, I'm okay working about 15, 20, 30 minutes over. Because I am. Now that I think about it, I work like 30 minutes over here or there to sync my schedule up or with other people or help other people out or finish something up. And part of that's like, oh, well, I don't have to drive. Like, the drive home stops me from doing a lot of things. Let's see. On-site workers are also working longer hours because it's required, and more remote workers say they're doing it because they enjoy what they do. Imagine that, enjoying your job. Oh my goodness. Oh man, I'm dying. I might have to end this video. My throat's going. How many meetings per week is this? Remote workers attend more meetings each week than on-site workers. Makes sense because you have to connect a little bit more. But I will say that when you work remote, you can just sort of wait for your name to be called and then move forward. So that's something I do quite often where I'm actually working on something where it's like, I don't really need to be here. But, you know, it all sort of just depends. Some breakdown. Challenges during hybrid meetings. I don't care about this. Meetings suck. How meetings impact productivity. Remote workers say meetings reduce productivity. So I kind of disagree with this because they do, but I can also work in the background. Who's received training? Anyone in this video received training? I've never received training from anybody. 38% received training. You're not going to get any training in any job. Get that out of your mind. We asked remote employee managers about the biggest challenges and concerns when it comes to managing. Reduced employee productivity, reduced employee focus, lower employee engagement and satisfaction, and whether their remote employees are getting their work done. So they're just worried that people are not doing stuff. Managers are least concerned about employee loneliness, the career implications, and overworking and difficulty managing them. So they're just worried that they're doing the job. That seems pretty standard. Anything else in here? Do remote workers still shower when they get up in the morning? I shower twice a day. Fun fact. I like taking showers. One at night, one in the morning. All right? Why we made this report. I don't know. But that was pretty interesting stuff. So if you're interested in working remote, it seems like it's becoming more and more of a trend, especially in the U.S., and especially as your salary gets up there and you start hitting that sort of glass ceiling. But if you're interested in reading this report, I'll include a link in the description below. As always, guys, don't forget to check out my courses. You can get them for just $9.99. My latest bestseller, the 100 Front-End Interview Questions Challenge. Check it out. Links in the description. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Hey guys, don't forget to hit that notification bell or smash that like button while you're at it. And if you're interested, I just released my latest course, the 100 Front-End Technical Question Challenge, which is there to help you pass those front-end technical interviews. There's over 100 questions. You can get it for just $9.99. The link is in the description below, or use coupon code CodingGod.